I never thought working as a security guard would be anything more than boring night shifts, but that changed everything. My name is Marcus, and I worked as a night security guard at Riverside Mall in Ohio. It was a pretty easy job most of the time. I'd walk around making sure all the stores were locked and spend most of my shift watching the security cameras in the control room. The mall had this old basement level that wasn't used anymore. About 10 years ago, they sealed it off with a heavy metal door with multiple bolts. My boss told me on my first day that the basement was off limits and to never go down there. He said the structure wasn't safe anymore. Everything was normal for the first 6 months. Then one night in November, around 2 a.m., I was sitting in the control room watching the cameras. I was flipping through the different feeds when I stopped on camera 12. That was the camera pointing at the basement door. What I saw made my coffee cup slip out of my hand. There was a man standing behind the locked basement door. I could see him through the small window. He was pale, incredibly pale, like he'd never seen sunlight. He was just standing there completely still, facing the camera. His eyes were dark, and he wasn't blinking. He just stared directly at the camera. I grabbed my flashlight and radio and ran down to the lower level. When I got to the basement door, I checked the bolts. They were all still locked tight. I looked through the small window into the dark basement, shining my flashlight around. Nothing. Nobody there. The basement was completely empty. I was confused and decided to go back to the control room. As I was walking back, something made me glance at one of the monitors on the wall. It was camera 12 again. I saw myself standing there in the hallway. But behind me on the monitor, standing just a few feet away, was the pale man. He was out of the basement now. He was following me. I spun around immediately. Nobody there. The hallway behind me was completely empty. But when I looked back at the monitor, he was still there on the screen, standing right behind where I was. I started running back to the control room, my hands shaking. I kept checking the monitors as I passed them, and on every single screen, the pale man was right behind me, matching my movements exactly, following me in real time on the cameras, but nowhere to be seen when I looked with my own eyes. I burst into the control room and locked the door. I sat down and pulled up all the camera feeds at once. I started scanning through them frantically. Then I found him. He was on camera 8, standing in the main hallway, just standing there, staring at the camera. Then he started walking, slowly, walking toward the control room, toward me. I watched in horror as he moved from camera to camera, getting closer. Camera 8, camera 6, camera 4. He was coming. When I looked back at the monitors, he was on camera 2, right outside the control room door. I could hear footsteps in the hallway. Slow, heavy footsteps, stopping right outside my door. The doorknob started to turn. I had locked it, but it was turning anyway. The door slowly opened, and I pressed myself back against the wall, grabbing a chair to defend myself. But nobody came in. The door just stood open, showing an empty hallway. I stayed frozen there until the sun started to come up around 6 a.m. I walked out of that mall and never came back. I didn't even pick up my last paycheck. I called my boss and told him I quit. He didn't say anything for a long moment, then he told me I was the 4th guard to quit this year. They all said the same thing. They all saw the pale man. I work at a grocery store now during the day. I'll never work another night shift again. Sometimes I still have nightmares about watching those monitors and seeing him getting closer. And I wonder if he's still down there in that basement, waiting behind that locked door looking for the next person to follow. I never thought working the overnight shift at a gas station would turn into the scariest night of my life, but that's exactly what happened. My name is Trevor, and I worked at a 24-hour gas station on Route 9 in rural Pennsylvania. It was one of those lonely stations in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by empty fields and woods. During the day it was busy, but at night, especially after midnight, I'd go hours without seeing a single customer. The job was simple. I'd sit behind the counter, restock shelves, and watch movies on my phone to pass the time. Nothing ever went wrong, so I didn't worry about it. That all changed one night in late October. It was a Wednesday, and the weather was cold and foggy. I started my shift at 11 p.m., like usual. Around 2 a.m., I was restocking the candy aisle when I saw movement outside the window. A woman was walking past wearing a long, dark coat that went down to her ankles. Her hair was hanging over her face. She walked slowly past the front windows, heading toward the side of the building. I thought she was going to come inside, but she didn't. She just walked past and disappeared around the corner. I figured she was stretching her legs or looking for the bathroom, but she never came in. About an hour later, at 3 a.m., I saw her again. Same woman, same long coat, walking past the windows in the exact same direction. Slow, steady steps, heading around the side of the building. I watched carefully, waiting for her to come to the door. But again, she just circled around and disappeared. I started to feel uneasy. Why would someone just walk circles around a gas station at 3 in the morning? I checked the security cameras on the monitor behind the counter. I rewound the footage and watched her walk past. Something about the way she moved felt wrong, too stiff, too deliberate. At 3:12 a.m., I saw her again. This time I decided to confront her. I grabbed a flashlight and walked out the front door into the cold night air. The fog was thick and I could barely see anything. I called out asking if anyone was there, if someone needed help. No response. I walked around the entire building, shining my flashlight everywhere. Nothing. No woman, no footprints, no car. She had completely vanished. I went back inside, feeling confused and scared. I locked the door and went back to the counter. That's when I noticed the security monitor. The screen was frozen on a single frame. It showed the woman standing directly in front of the window, her face pressed against the glass. Her eyes were completely black. Not just dark, but entirely black, like empty voids. Her mouth was slightly open, and her pale skin looked gray and lifeless. I stumbled backward and nearly fell. When I looked up at the actual window, nobody was there. But on the monitor, that frozen frame stayed there, her black eyes staring directly into the camera. I grabbed my phone and called 911. I told them someone was outside acting strange. They said they'd send an officer, but it would take at least 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes felt like hours. I kept watching the windows, expecting to see her face pressed against the glass. The monitor eventually unfroze and went back to normal. When the police arrived, I told them everything. They searched around the building but found nothing. No footprints, no signs of anyone. They told me it was probably just someone messing with me. But I knew what I saw. That frozen frame, those black eyes staring at me. That wasn't a prank. I quit that job the next day. I told my boss I had a family emergency. I wasn't going to spend another night in that place. I got a job at a warehouse where I worked during the day with other people around. I'll never work alone at night again. Sometimes I still think about that woman in the long coat, circling the building over and over, and I wonder if she's still there, walking past those windows every hour, waiting for someone else to step outside and look for her. I never thought stocking shelves at a grocery store would become the most disturbing job I ever had. But that's exactly what happened. My name is Jamie, and I worked the midnight shift at a Save Mart in a small town in Oregon. The store closed at 11 p.m., and my coworker Ryan and I would come in to restock everything before the store opened again at 6 a.m. It was boring work, but the pay was decent, and we usually just listened to music and talked to pass the time. We'd been working together for about 6 months, and nothing weird had ever happened. The store was always empty and quiet, just the two of us and the hum of the refrigerators. That all changed one night in November. Ryan and I were working on aisle 5, stocking canned goods, when we both heard it at the same time. Giggling. A little girl giggling, high-pitched and playful, coming from somewhere in the store. We both stopped what we were doing and looked at each other. The giggling came again, louder this time, clearly coming from aisle 7. We put down our boxes and walked over to check it out. Aisle 7 was the cereal aisle, and when we turned the corner, nobody was there. The aisle was completely empty. But something was very wrong. Every single cereal box on both sides of the aisle had been turned around backward. All of them. The colorful mascots that should have been facing out were now facing the shelf, and all we could see were the plain white backs of the boxes. There had to be at least 100 boxes, and every single one had been flipped. Ryan and I just stood there staring. I asked him if he did this as a joke, and he said no. He'd been with me the whole time. We both had been in aisle 5, and we definitely would have heard someone moving that many boxes. We decided to just turn all the boxes back around and get back to work. It took us almost 15 minutes to flip every box so they were facing the right way again. The whole time I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see someone watching us. We finished and moved on to aisle 8. About 10 minutes later, we heard the giggling again. Same little girl's voice, coming from aisle 7. We both ran back to check. What we saw made my blood run cold. All the cereal boxes were turned backward again. Every single one. But this time they weren't just flipped around randomly. They were arranged. The boxes had been moved and positioned so that when you looked at the white backs, they spelled out a word. Play. The boxes spelled out play in letters about 2 feet tall, running down the center of the aisle. Ryan grabbed my arm and told me we needed to leave right now. We didn't even grab our phones or jackets. We just ran to the front door, unlocked it, and got out of there. We stood in the parking lot, both of us shaking. We called our manager and told him what happened. He told us we were probably just tired and seeing things. We told him we quit. The next day, I went back during store hours to pick up my last paycheck. I talked to one of the daytime workers, an older woman named Carol, who'd been there for 20 years. I told her what happened and asked if anything weird had ever gone on. Her face went pale, and she told me to follow her to the break room. Carol told me that 15 years ago, a little girl had gotten separated from her mother in the store. She wandered into the back storage area, and a stack of heavy boxes fell on her. She died before the ambulance arrived. The girl was 7 years old, and her favorite thing in the whole store was the cereal aisle. After the accident, weird things started happening on the night shift. Workers would hear giggling, find things moved around, and several people quit because of it. I never went back to that store, not even to shop. Ryan moved to a different state a month later. Sometimes I still hear that little girl's giggling in my head, and I wonder if she's still there in aisle 7, turning those cereal boxes around, waiting for someone to play with her.